What's up guys, back today with another longer video, which is to build a job board app that could actually be a real startup that people use. There's a lot of different places to find entry-level or junior developer jobs on the internet. For example, GitHub jobs, Stack Overflow jobs, you have AngelList, you have Indeed, but filtering through those, especially because you kind of have to spam applications for your first job, can take a long time. So the good thing about all these job boards is they have public APIs for the most part. You always want to start with an MVP, that is the minimum viable product. Today, that means we're going to start with a single data feed, that is a single job board API feeding into our app. And then finally, we're going to have a super minimal, simple front end. We're going to do this in React and Material UI on the front end. We're going to use an Express server, Redis for our data storage because we're not writing or persisting any data that is not part of the job feed. And then finally, a node cron job to fetch these jobs and refresh them at a certain interval, which are going to be filtered through an algorithm. So let's draw this all out to get a better idea of our plan. Here's our front end. What we basically want here is a list of jobs. This is going to be pulling data from our API, and that'll be Express. And then this will pull from our store, which is actually going to be Redis. And Redis will be populated by our cron, we'll call it a worker, which is pulling from one or more APIs. It's going to be eventually multiple. These are going to be job board APIs. So like let's say Indeed, we have GitHub, we have Stack Jobs, and this is going to be filtered through our algorithm. We're filtering down the jobs, getting rid of the senior jobs, getting rid of the manager jobs, and eventually when we make it more complicated, we could even look through the description for years of experience and create search indexes and different things like that. But again, the minimum is just going to be pulling the jobs in and filtering them down. Okay, so this is our plan. Let's start with the front end. I know a lot of you guys like React, and it's going to actually be super simple. Let's just do a create React app to get started. I already have a folder or a directory here called junior dev. So let's do a create React app and then call it client. You guys know that I love Material UI, so let's install that as well once we get into our client. And let's do yarn add. Okay, that's done. And we will start our React app. Okay, let's go through the stuff we can actually delete. No tests. You always want to write tests in real life, but not today. Delete logo. And also clear this out here. Now let's open the Material UI docs. Let's get our component API and let's get a title for our page. Typography, H1. Let's just copy this. And instead of putting it directly in app, let's make a new component for jobs. And then let's make a new component for a single job called job, which we'll use in jobs. And then let's import React. Export default function. Okay. In this, we will use typography. Okay. So just to explain what I'm doing here, I am making a separate component because I want our app just to hold our state, and then jobs will actually hold our component tree, our render styling, and app will hold our application state, our use state, and call our hooks for component did mount and for state. That was really confusing, sorry. Okay, we're using typography here, and let's do variant, typography, variant. Okay, I'm naming our page entry-level software jobs. I think it's a good name. Then save, import jobs. Throw that in there like this. Okay, that is some huge text, but we're going to leave it for now. Within jobs, we already know we're going to import job. Make this a similar export. We'll just copy this whole thing. Almost sneezed. Okay, return div, and then this will just be a single job row, which we'll put on a class name of single job. And then we'll just do this in advance because we know we're going to eventually have to write some CSS to style this stuff. Let's make a job list. Should probably actually be matching our component name. Just to change that back, jobs, and then job. Okay, so let's just say that we're passing down some props for all our jobs from our app which is holding our state. Let's just do it like this, and let's do some mock JSON that we might return from our API. SWE, Software Engineer 1, and company, Google. There's going to be a bunch of fields, but let's just leave them like that for now. Name it mock job so we don't get them mixed up. Mock just being mock JSON data, and it should work. And we could do jobs, map, job. This will return a job. Job equals job. Hopefully that's not too confusing. Okay, now we could just here destructure job. In the box, put job.title. Let's see if this works. There it is, job.title and job.company. And let's actually add some CSS for job and just make it a display flex. Direction. Oh, that's why. Always freaking hard switching from JSX to JavaScript. Okay, there we go. Boom. We'll leave it like that for now. We can add more stuff to this this list if we want. This Facebook, Apple, it'll map it out for us. Let's give that a little bit of margin and a little bit of padding. Let's do a 10 pixel top, left, right, 0, and then padding will be the same. Not too bad, not too bad. So our front end, we could call this like kind of done. Let's call this done for now, and let's return to it after doing some full stack stuff. So I'm gonna collapse our client. Let's see what our actual data feed is gonna look like coming from our source, which I'm just gonna use as GitHub jobs because I know that has a really good clean API output that you don't need a key for or anything. So API GitHub jobs, open it up. You can see some examples here, okay? So it says that the API supports pagination. It'll return 50 at a time, and you can do it by adding a parameter to your queries. Before jumping ahead, we just know we want these JSON representation of these jobs so we can manipulate it with our node worker. So what I'm actually going to do is call a similar URL like this in our node side, which is going to give us output like this. Just by eyeballing this, I could see that it is somewhat matching what we already wrote out here in app.js, where there's a title somewhere. Yes, like that. Senior full stack Node.js developer. And there is a company somewhere. And we can also tell in advance that location is going to be an important field too. But basing our analysis on this, we could start to model kind of what our worker is going to do, as well as how we want our API to act as well. So looking back at our plan, let's actually just make a folder for all our boxes here. So this is the client, right? API is going to be simple express server, and then the worker is going to have our algorithm, and it's going to be calling our APIs on a cron job, which is at a set interval. So maybe every hour in the day, we want to refresh these APIs, refresh our Redis, and make sure that everything is up to date. There's no expired jobs that the companies don't want people to see anymore. And we're basically staying in sync with whatever is in our upstream data source. So within worker, I want to create an index.js, which is going to manage all our worker tasks. And I know already that we're going to need the cron node library. It's just going to help us run simple cron jobs, which is what I was saying before is it's the way you run a task on an interval basically forever if you want to. Opening up a new terminal tab, going out to our main directory. And within our main directory, I'm just going to create a package JSON, which is going to be accessible from all our different folders. So you can see that was created here. And then we just want to install cron as a dependency. Now inside a worker, this is the way I pretty much start with every app. You just copy kind of the basic usage and you build your way out from there. So all this does is it's running a node process where we're importing the library, and then this is called a cron shorthand, cron syntax, something like that. Cron.guru. You can see it here. Okay, so this site is really useful. No, not this site. Cron Guru. Cron tab guru. Okay, so these asterisks are called a cron schedule expression. And it's basically symbols for how often you want your job to run. You can test it over here. /1. That's actually every minute. This is every second. This is every second minute. It's every third minute, right? So you just have to play around with the syntax. It'll tell you here how to do it, and then you could do kind of whatever interval you want. So you could do like once a day, I think, one. Yeah, so you just gotta mess with it to do what you want, and then you could just Google exactly what you want to do, and you pull the cron expression from that. But this is kind of a playground to get the cron expression you definitely want to do. All right, so let's test this this basic implementation of cron to just see if it works. And in our real production app, this is actually gonna run every second, not every second, every let's say hour to fetch our jobs. So this will fire off some function, which is now being passed in as this anonymous function that is just console logging. But what we're eventually going to put in there is our script to fetch the jobs and then filter them down. So in this worker folder, I'm going to make a GitHub, or rather, let's do it this way. I'm going to make a tasks folder, and then we'll do one called fetch github.js. And we just want to play around with that, GitHub API and get it to do what we want. So the good part about the GitHub API, the good thing about the GitHub API, and part of the reason why I picked it, is because it is pretty much all developer jobs. So we don't have to filter out for developer jobs. We could just assume they're all tech jobs, and then we will take the ones that are just junior software engineer, or more specifically, not senior or not manager. So we know our URL is roughly going to look like this. To do a backend URL fetch request, I'm going to install the node fetch library, which is the same as the client-side fetch library, but you could use it in Node.js. Okay, so I just require it like that. Then let's do an anonymous async function just to, actually, no, let's do it this way. Export default async function. Just did a hey Siri for some reason. Nope. Okay, so fetch GitHub there, and I'll just call it here just for testing purposes. And within here, let's do a jobs await fetch, and we'll do base URL equals this without the query string. Let's break this down a little bit. We have a question mark, then a description equals, then Ruby, and page equals 1. So this is called a query string here. It's a way to pass parameters through a URL. So we're passing parameters to the server through the query string syntax, which is key equals value, like this. So in our case, we're going to want to iterate through the pages. That is, we want to get all the results from all the pages and combine them together. The way I think we want to do that is just by leaving this like this. So this is just our truly base URL. And then let's actually see what happens. Let's see how many jobs we get back just by doing this and then logging out jobs.length. Keep in mind that this function is going to run because we're calling it here when we just run a node on fetch github.js. Okay, I forgot we still can't do that. And let's just do this. Okay, undefined. Let's console log this. Jobs. Oh, forgot we also have to do this. This is just our raw response. This is jobs. res.json. Still not resolving, because this is an async function too. Okay, 50. I already kind of knew this going in, but if you put no parameters here, it just gives you the first page only. So we have to add a query string for each page and iterate through to get all the results until we get back an empty page. Best way to solve this is to keep adding 1 to the page number. So we start at 0, then we try page 1, then we try page 2, until we get back a page with 0 results. So if this is the way we do it for one page, we're just going to want to run the same subroutine for every page that's not empty. To make this a little more clear, I don't like really how we've written this out so far. Let's just do it like this. Maybe it's just me being lazy. So while the page result count is not empty, we're going to do this. And we have to keep track of the page we're on, as well as the result count. So let's make result count a not 0 value, because if it's 0, it'll break our loop. So let's just start at an arbitrary value 1, and then after we fetch the first page, it'll be 50. Then it'll be whatever the second page is until it's 0, at which point this while loop will break. So we'll initialize it to 1, and then let's also initialize our, what are we going to call it? On page equals 0. We'll start on page 0. Okay, so base URL, we'll do a template literal here, and then slash, or not, instead of slash, we'll do our query string. Page equals on page. Okay, so we loop, we get our jobs length. We're going to want to also push the jobs we get back into an array called all jobs. Let's do all jobs push the jobs we get back from that page. Let's keep this in here just so we know what's happening. And then finally, increase our on-page value. Okay. Again, just to review, setting our result count to a non-zero value, starting on page 0, creating an empty array to hold the results we're getting back from the API. We start a while loop that's going to run as long as we're getting results back by increasing one page at a time. So getting page 0, getting page 1, getting page 2. Here's where the URL is constructed, base URL from up here, and then page starting at 0. Pulling out the JSON from the response, putting that JSON in our array, logging out how many jobs we got back, increasing the page count, repeating until we run out of, or rather we run into an empty page. Finally, we have all our jobs, so let's just log out how many jobs we got total, which we're going to eventually be returning. All right, now these console logs give us an idea of what's happening in our function here, otherwise we would have no idea. Since we refactored a little bit, we have to call the function again. Let's see what happens. Hopefully this is not infinite loop, please. Uh-oh. Oh no, okay. Okay, what happened there? I guess we didn't break. Oh, because we're not setting result count. Okay, so we gotta do this. Result count equals jobs length. Okay, there, that should work now. But for the most part, good. Okay, so there's one thing we also overlooked, I think. Let's look back at this. This is a sample response we're getting back. And if we look at this whole object, let's just assume this is like page 0. It's coming back with an array, but then we're pushing that array directly into our all jobs. So this is actually creating an array of arrays. Whereas really we want a flat array, just a single array holding all these job objects. So the simple way to do that is to spread that in with the spread operator. We're just dumping the array into another array by spreading the values in. If we run that, we're totally gonna see this is gonna work. I'm super confident. Why? Why did it not work that time? That's weird. Interesting. Okay, that's probably something we have to debug. Maybe it was a weird response from the server. So our fetch GitHub function is done. We're returning all our jobs. Now, I think we actually want a way to save these jobs into a local storage that we can retrieve through our API. And actually, before we do that, I'm getting ahead of myself, but we want to call this entire function on an interval. So let's go back to cron tab. Let's just call it every, let's call it every minute. Make sure I'm doing that right. Yeah, every minute. Here we'll import our fetch GitHub function. Fetch GitHub, boom. Just throw it in here, boom. And the beauty of this is we can repeat this for as many functions as we want, right? We could fetch GitHub, we could fetch Stack Overflow jobs, we could fetch Indeed, and we could create a cron tab for each one that is not dependent on one another to succeed or fail. So these could be all trying in parallel. And they could also give us kind of a rolling refresh of our jobs. So maybe one could run every 10th minute of the hour, one could run every 20th minute, and it'll just continuously refresh without hitting any one of these APIs too often. Let's test the cron aspect of that. I just turned it on, and it's running for the first time now, but then it should run again after a minute. Okay. And that's not going to work because I actually ran directly the fetch GitHub one. But if I do index... Okay, it's gonna wait a minute. Oh shit, okay, I messed up. Okay, so I copied exactly over from cron tab every minute. Okay, well I guess if you put 6 stars, it'll do seconds. And if you put 5, it'll do minutes. So lesson learned there. So we'll see if that works after a minute. And in the meantime, let's talk about storage. And like I mentioned earlier, we're gonna wanna store these jobs actually in Redis. Now, I already have Redis installed, but you can install it through Homebrew pretty easily. Just if you don't have Homebrew installed, you look up Homebrew installation. It's a simple, easy download, And then you can install anything with a brew install, for example, Redis, and then it'll basically install Redis under the hood in your system in a directory called the brew services. So then you can start and stop, restart it from that position. Jumping back up to this, you'll notice that it worked after a minute, so that's awesome. So let's see if it runs again after another minute. I just cleared the terminal there with Command K. But like I was saying about Redis, I've already installed it with brew install Redis, and you can install it yourself if you don't already have it. There are a couple different ways to install Redis, but it should always connect the same way. Since I'm starting a new project here, I just want to make sure my Redis is clear. So, there's a command line command that allows you to connect to the Redis client, and then we want to clear all our Redis with it's a similar language to like a SQL, where you can basically, this is like a drop table, and then we just cleared everything out of our Redis, so we got a fresh start. And you'll see it ran again after a minute. So we can stop that, we can leave it running, whatever. I'm just gonna stop it, but we know our cron tab refresh is working every minute with our fetch GitHub. Okay, I have Redis installed, and if you're not familiar with Redis, it's just a key value store. So it's an in-memory database. MySQL is a little bit different because it's on disk, but Redis is just memory. So it's not persistent, and that means if your system shuts off, you lose all your RAM. So it's not a fault-tolerant database. It's not a durable database. And the upside is, though, that it's really fast. It's kind of like an object in JavaScript. If you have the key, it's constant time access. You just pull it out of your Redis store, and then you can serve it up. In our case, jumping back over to these job JSON that we got from GitHub, you can see every job has a UUID, which is a guaranteed unique ID because it has so many characters and it's random characters, so it'll be guaranteed unique every time. Every job has one of these IDs, so that's a natural candidate to use as a Redis key. I'm thinking within Redis, our key is going to be this ID, and our value is just going to be the whole job object. So it'll be a string version of this that we can then pull out. We know it's already JSON, so we can just stringify it, and then when we pull it out, we'll just parse it into a JavaScript object. Now, the slightly tricky part of this is, okay, how do we access Redis through our node worker, right? Because we have all the jobs here. Right now, we're just logging them and throwing them away, but we want to put them in Redis. And the answer to that is there's a node client library to access and connect to and do all the Redis actions. So it's an interface that Node uses called the client. That's a library that will do everything you need to do in Redis, and you can do it through Node with this library. So I'm just going to search for Node Redis, and then we will install it just like the same way as before. And I'm going to do exactly like I said before, what the getting started docs say. I know this is going to be better if we promisify this library, because you can see right now that we have all the Redis commands here, like set is setting a key, and then there's one called get, which will retrieve that key. Just think of it like an object. So if you put in key A, and then the val is 1, then you do client.get, you'll retrieve that 1 from the A key. Set and get functions are async, so it's not going to be in line with your JavaScript code. And that's just the name of the game, because Redis is not in JavaScript, so there's no way to know when its response comes back programmatically in line. It's going to wait. Redis could be over a network, so it's going to take an indeterminate amount of time to serve the request, and then that's going to come back to the function call in this format. So this is the standard callback format in Node, error, and then data. Replies is going to be the response. Now, you could just ignore all of that, because we're going to promisify this library with the promisify util in Node, which will convert callback functions into promises that we could use await or then promise chaining with, and so on. Let me just do this. I'm just literally copy pasting it from the docs, and get async is the example, which is converting that client.get function to a promise. Gotta put this below the client variable declaration so it works. And I can tell you now that we're also going to need a set async. We were thinking of setting each job as its own item in Redis, right? Which would be fine if we were ever querying for those keys, but we're not. We're in the MVP going to just get all the jobs, serve them back to the client, and then we'll let the client handle pagination or any kind of showing and hiding of these jobs. So until we do that, or rather until we decide we want to optimize this query on the server, we could actually just set the response from GitHub as the value of a single key. It'll be a huge text blob that we just serve up to the front end. And the only reason we're doing this is because of performance. We don't want to have to wait for the API to respond every time we serve a client request. So Redis is only a buffer that's an intermediary holding this data that we're only fetching once every hour because the jobs aren't refreshing that often. So that's a long-winded way of saying that once we create this all jobs array, we actually are just gonna throw the whole thing under one key, and we'll call that key GitHub. Also, let's hold on to this get function in our head, because we're not gonna be pulling out of our Redis until we're in the API layer, which is serving the jobs request. Man, I have kind of a stuffy nose. Okay, let's do the set async, and this takes a value GitHub, or a key rather GitHub, and then a value will be our all jobs. We might need to stringify that, but we'll test it out. Okay, let's run node worker tasks fetch GitHub, and let's see if that works. And we can test it like this: get GitHub. That we still have our Redis CLI open there. Okay, so far nothing happened. That's not a good sign. And here's why. To call our function just as a test. I'm gonna take that out. Okay. I hope this sniffly nose hasn't been annoying you guys too much. It's actually annoying me, and I hope it's not super loud on the microphone. Okay, the get command contains an argument of type object. Okay, I didn't like that at all. I'm not using get, so I don't know what it's talking about here. But okay, I know now. Set, and then okay, let's try that. Okay, set contains the argument of type object, and as we expected, this is like an array. I think this is gonna work, to be honest. Nice. Get GitHub. There it is. Redis is working. Our fetch worker is totally great. We'll leave these logs in just so we have that telemetry, that observability, but everything is working. Oops. Okay. Just make sure that's still working with our cron tab here. Oops. So we're supposed to remind me to take that out. We'll leave that running, and we'll jump over to our next piece. We look at our plan API. So let's just review this. Oh, actually, so we've got this API part done. Still need this, and then we'll improve our front end last. So filter algorithm. All right, let's look at what's in our store here. So we're getting jobs back, and like I said, we want to start with a really simple algorithm that is just filtering out by position. So just taking, like, eyeballing this, I can see that in the title, we can gain a few insights into what kind of job it is, right? If we see a senior in the title, we know it's not going to be a junior developer job. If we see manager in the title, we know it's not going to be a junior developer job. Another common thing we might see is like senior abbreviated as SR. I didn't see it in there, but I know that's done. So maybe if we see that word SR dot at all, then we want to filter it out. So this is our set in Redis. So we're going to want our filter before that. Fetch all pages. Filter. You could always factor this out to a function later, but for now, let's do it this way. Okay. New array, junior jobs. It's going to be a subset of all jobs, and we're going to filter based on a few different parameters, looking at each job. Okay. We're going to use one super important thing here, and that is the string.includes function, and we're going to use that on job title. So if the job title includes, or rather, stop Siri. Okay, let's do it this way, actually. Job title equals job title to lowercase. It's important. I think the example we saw in the terminal was in all caps. So we want to reduce that kind of variation by just lowercase in the whole title. We also don't have to keep accessing the object if we just store it in a variable. So this is for one job. And we're going through 392, so we're going to have to go through each one of those jobs real fast. That's part of the reason, too, why we're doing this cron method, is because if we fetch the jobs on every front-end request, we'd have to do this whole filter thing every time, and it's going to be the same logic. So in general, when you're doing the same logic for every client request, that's definitely a good case for caching or even database denormalization. So replicating data in your store, that's a commonly a common read pattern rather. All right, we could be more terse about this, but let's just make it super clear and have a default case, let is junior equals true. Then there's going to be our logic, and then we're going to just return the result, is junior, okay? Now this is going to be our main algorithm logic here. Okay, so if job title includes senior, we got to remember we changed it to lowercase, or job title includes manager, or job title includes sr dot senior, or another one and I thought about this before, I'm gonna put in is architect, because that is generally a more senior role as well that you're not gonna be able to do as a junior developer. That's something you have to gain a little skill from. Then you could design whole systems, and you may or may not be the one implementing them as well. But here's all the cases we want to filter out. If any of these are true, is junior equals false. Okay, so this is the most clear way we could do it, but I'm actually going to cut this part out, and then we'll do return false. Otherwise, we don't actually need else. Just that didn't happen, return true. Okay. Now we could test in our code how many get actually filtered out by this, by console logging filtered down to junior jobs length. Okay. And we do move this one up here. Actually, I think, yeah, we'll leave that in. Make sure we're adding junior jobs in here only. Console log success. Okay, that's bothering me. Okay, restart. Oops, restart. Clean slate. We'll get this extra log. We'll see how much damage our filter does, and then we will still set that in Redis, and then we can make sure it's still in there. Please work. Hey, nice. Cool. So if we're filtering out, okay, we went down from 392 all the way to 245. So we're filtering out almost 1/3 of the jobs just with these words, which I think is already making our app useful to some degree. Obviously, the more complex we make this algorithm, we could search through the job.description, look for years of experience. There's definitely more titles we can include here, but that would depend like what we see in the JSON. We can kind of pluck words out of there and be like, oh yeah, this was obviously a senior term too, and then add it to this list. But for now, I think it's a good start. Okay, let's see. Back in our planning, we just did our filter algorithm, or very basic version. Node work is done. So this whole section is done. Redis is done. API, and then we'll finish up with our front end, and then finally deploy. Okay, so let's actually just close everything. Open up API, index.js. Just want a super simple Express app. Express app. Again, same thing I said before. Just do that npm install. And then from there, you take the most basic example, make my port 3001 because I know my front end is running on 3000. Create a little bit of extra space here. And okay, and then this route, we don't need a slash, we just need a route called jobs. Okay, I love this part. There, Express install went through over here. Let's do, let's just run a node on API index.js. Sample app listening on port 3001, and then if I curl, which is just sending a request to something on the port 3001 /jobs, get the hello world back. Sweet. Okay, this is going to be the simplest API ever, and we just want to use that Redis library we already installed, and we're going to use the get, which we already commented out. And we already know which key we're going to get because we only set one. That really simplifies it. So we need to copy actually all this code and delete this because we don't need it here. Get the Redis client, get another instance of that here, and then do the get async. And this is where the async part is really going to come in handy. To convert this route to an async function, then we do jobs here, await, get async, GitHub, just hard code that in. Now, let's remember we stringified it. So JSON parse. And I'm going to actually undo this because we are just going to have to restringify it when we send it to our client. But in the meantime, just to see the length, or rather see that the length matches our length that we put in, let's parse it, and then let's do .length. Okay. So it's kind of a lot that we did without testing it. Let's restart our server, do the same curl. Oh man, okay, 245. I don't remember if that's how many we put in. We're definitely getting a list of 245, which is a good sign. Now let's just try sending this back and see if we get that full stringified object. That's exactly what we want, and it's that easy. So that's already done. So I don't know how long it's been, guys, but with this simple of an API, we can literally we've literally been able to create all this like in such a short amount of time. We have a data feed, and you can replicate, like, before I go further, you can replicate this in any, this is like 90% applications. If you have a data feed, you have storage, you have a worker that's doing some async task on an interval. It's called batch processing. You have an API that's called by a front end. This is like 90% of CRUD applications. That's create, read, upload, delete. In this case, we're only really reading from the front end, but the back end is doing some more complex stuff, including an algorithm. The pieces that we're using are used in some way in almost every large-scale application. So doing this as an MVP is like a really good exercise. All right, let's push on. I might be getting a little bit tired, but let's keep it going. Okay, so we have our API running. Let's keep this running. All right, let's just restart this so we have the log that we know we're listening. And I'm going to go back into our client folder. Okay, so we're back in our app. Close that. We're back in our app function, which we mentioned we're going to put the state in. Let's pull this back up. Okay, so make sure it's still running. All good. To call our API programmatically, the same way we're doing with curl here, we just need to call this URL with a function that we're going to make called fetch jobs. All it's going to do is use the browser version of fetch, which we don't need to import because it's built into browsers like Chrome. Let's, instead of hard coding, do a job API URL constant. It'll just be exactly what we have over here. Since this is async, we can use an await. Const jobs equals await. Of course, this will be in JSON, so we have to convert it to JSON. Let's do that. Call this res. Call this JSON equals await res.json. And then before going further, let's just log that out. Okay. How do we call this in our client? Define but never used. I know, I'm getting there. Okay, if you see my past videos, I talked about React hooks. These are replacing all React class components. Now we just have functional components, and we've seen hooks for use reducer, use state, and all that kind of stuff. Since this app is just a very simple state, it's a list of jobs, I don't feel like I need to use a reducer. And I know exactly the shape of these jobs as well, so I don't need to do any reducer-like manipulation. And it's also very hierarchical and shallow application, meaning I just want to pass down these jobs one level to my jobs view component from this app state. I started talking about hooks, and we've used the use state hook a lot in my past videos, but we're going to use one that we haven't used too much yet here, which is called use effect. And that's basically replacing the component did mount or component did update function from past versions of React. So I'm going to use it here, react.use effect. And then this function actually takes a anonymous function in which I can do some function calls, some async function calls, as well as a second argument, which is the basically hooks that I want to watch to update. But if I pass in an empty array, this react.use effect will act exactly like a component did mount. All right, inside here, just gonna fetch jobs. And I also want to think about how I'm going to store those jobs. So let's also do a use state hook. Jobs, using that word jobs a lot, so let me just do job list was react.use state and update jobs react.use state, and then I'll initialize this to an empty list, which I'm actually going to pass in here. So when I do that, that should actually clear out all my jobs. Okay, good, because I'm initializing it to an empty list. Okay, in here I'm fetching jobs. Console log JSON. See what happens here. Failed to fetch. Ah, right. This is one thing you're going to definitely run into if you're writing Express apps and you're pretty new. It's the access control allow origin. So this is something you have to set in your server if you're accessing endpoints from a different base URL. It's called cross origin resource sharing. And you basically have to set a server header in your API that allows requests from the URL that is origin. So recall that our React app's running on localhost 3000, as we can see here. So all I have to do is set a header. I think it's like just literally that, but let me just copy something so I make sure I'm doing it right. Cores res header express. Yeah, here it is. That's all I need. Res header access control allow origin, but if I do the star, that makes it not protected. So I just want to make this HTTP localhost 3000. Okay. Now this will, I think I'm 92% sure it's gonna work. All right, I type it wrong? Huh? I didn't restart my server, that's why. That was the 8%, me not restarting it. Wow, Nice, guys. There we go. That's all our jobs. Beautiful. Okay. We're getting close. Okay, fetch jobs is, it's working. I think what we still need is a callback to update these jobs. So let's just do this. Update, callback. As we know, when we use a useState hook, the second variable that we destructure from the useState hook is a function in which we can pass a argument that is the new value of our state for job list. So if I pass it in here like this, update callback, and then I pass the JSON directly into this, I'm actually just setting the value of job list to this JSON, which is, as we can see over here, an array of size 245 containing our jobs. Okay, so I got update callback, job list. I didn't even have to do anything else. It's already rendering all the jobs that are from GitHub. That's pretty cool. Hey guys, I'm back with a new shirt. Let's finish up this front end and then get this app deployed. I've pulled up another plan board here just to make it a little bit more clear what we want to do with the front end. Like I said before, we always want to have a plan before we just jump into coding. And the first thing I'm going to draw out is just the current way the app looks, which is just the title and then the list of all our jobs here. Right now, our jobs only have the title and the company name, but we're definitely going to want also to have the location. So title, company, we're definitely going to want location as well as the time posted. And I think the best format for time is how long ago. So today, 1 day ago, 2 days ago, etc. Now this is in the list view, and we got to think about too, what is going to happen when we click on a job. And in that case, I want to build a detail view modal, also known as a dialog or a pop-up that will show more details about the job, which will include the company logo, description, as well as the apply link. And that could also be a button if we decide to make it like that. Okay, so these are the main things we still need to, these are the main things we want in our front end. The good news is, since we already have the JSON, we just have to pull it out of the JSON of each job and create a little bit extra functionality to make this modal animate. Luckily, this is pretty easy with Material UI, and in fact, it's the main reason I wanted to use it for this project, because you get the modal for free with all the animations and stuff like that. So let's just jump back over to our front end here, and I'm gonna pull open the jobs component. Here I have variant H1, but I think this title is definitely a little bit too big. I don't think it, I think that's pretty obvious. And I'm gonna switch this up to still using a H1 HTML under the hood, but the variant will actually make it an H4 stylistically. So that's a pretty cool trick if you want to maintain the benefits of having an H1 for SEO and so on. Diving into the job itself, let's actually log out what a single job is going to look like, just so we know what we're working with. And instead of doing that here in the job component, I'm going to do it in jobs. And we could just look at what the first job looks like. So I'm going to use jobs 0 for that. Then we'll open the console and see that we have the fields we can use here. So I said we wanted to add location and time posted to our list view. We could pretty easily just pull out location in our job component like the way we've been doing with the other ones. And there it goes. This is looking a little bit, let's say, disorganized, but let's worry about that in just a moment. For now, I'm just going to throw these all in a div, which is going to be floating to the left of our box, and instead of space around, I want to change this CSS to space between. It'll make sense more in a minute why I'm doing that. Finally, in another div, let's do the created date, which I believe is over here in our JSON as well. Created _at. And I'm just kind of using these typography elements interchangeably as divs. So later on, we can change the size of these different things. Okay, so created at. Let's just see if the spacing looks all right there. Now that I see this here, I think the date doesn't actually look too bad as long as we make it a little bit shorter. So let's just split it by space and then take the the first three words. So let's take 024 and then join that by a space. So all I'm doing here is taking Sunday, June 9th out of this longer string. I meant to do 0 to 3. There we go. So we get index 0, 1, and 2. All right, looking at our page, it deserves a little bit of padding. Just it's pushed up against the side here. So let's add that quickly and keep going. Let's give body a margin. Top and bottom 0, left and right 40. Okay, top and bottom 20. Right, and then within job, maybe we give a little padding. Top and bottom, left and right 10. Okay, pretty good. Now inside job, we'll actually add some hierarchy, style hierarchy to our job title. Let's do H5, H6 on this, and so on. We could just keep updating, editing this. I think I'm actually going to flip these around, H6, H5, but you get the point. You could just keep tweaking it. Okay, let's add that pagination thing I mentioned. It's going to be kind of a fake pagination. You're supposed to do it on the server to not load all your results at once, but this is a good stopgap. We start just with the client implementation, and then later, if we want to improve the performance, we could do the server side too. But long story short, we have over 200 results. We want these on more than one page so they're more navigable. So to solve this, I opened a material UI page for the stepper component. And I really like this one down here called the mobile stepper progress. So you could click through it like this. It fills up kind of a progress bar. And it says mobile, but I like it, so I'm just going to pull it over. Let's see. Let's just pull over everything here just in case we need it, and then paste it right into our jobs component. And we could use the word step here interchangeably with page. And I'm putting this state in jobs because it's more of a view state rather than an actual data-based state. So all our logic concerning our view is going to actually be in jobs and not in the app file. Okay, so since these each have their own function, handle next, handle next, handle back, I'm just going to copy these directly over to, paste those right in, function inside a function. And all right, finally, I'm going to just put this whole thing below our jobs map. And let's see if by pasting it directly in, we need to do anything else. Just going to make sure that's formatted correctly, saved it, and let's just take this out. Classes, theme, I don't think, oh, theme.direction RTL. Okay, let's see how theme is being used, because this is kind of a, all right, I don't know why that would change from left to right, but it might be a mobile implementation specific thing. So let's just take this and hard code it as right, and we'll hard code this one as left and see if we run into any problems. Okay, saved that and can't find module. Oh, I forgot about this. Material UI icons is a separate library, so we have to also install that in our client. Yarn add material UI icons. Now, while that's installing, let's think about how else we want to use our pages. If we want to artificially construct these pages from a larger list, then we basically just want to break things into a slice depending on the number of results we want to show at a given time. So let's think of it as a moving window of 50. So if step equals 1, or let's say step equals 0, then we want to show 0 through 49. Step equals 1, show 50 through 100, and so on. Or maybe 50 through 99. Okay, so since our icon's finished, let's see if that worked. We gotta go all the way to the bottom, and yes, it is here. Next and back. Okay. Okay, so let's make this more dynamic. Steps is hard-coded as 6. If we want 50 per page, we're gonna have to do our, well, since we're gonna use this in a couple different places, let's get our job length, or num jobs equals jobs.length, just for better abstraction. Steps will be num jobs divided by 50, and then we'll math floor that. Or let's actually math seal that, because it'll be minimum. One page could have, you know, only one job on it. So we want minimum, okay? So that seems about right. It seems like we have about 4 pages just by the amount of times I click that. And let's add a little more detail to right above this mobile stepper that just says, and I'm just making it a div for now, but we could change it. Page active step of num jobs. Okay. Not okay. Let's factor this out. Num pages equals this, and then we can also use this where we are. Oh, there's lagging again. Num pages, like that. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty confident about that. Let's see if it worked. If we go to the bottom, my wrist is getting real tired of scrolling here. All right, and then one thing I actually meant to do earlier too is okay, going all the way down. Okay, 05. Oh, back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so the display number we want to actually be active step +1, because we're 0 index and we're going up to 4. Yeah, so this will work. Num pages -1, because the index is actually 1 less than the true value. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we'll just leave it as num pages. All right. One other thing that I meant to add earlier is the total number of jobs at the top, right under the title. So let's do a variant h6 and put in the total number of jobs here. Num jobs. 245. Cool. Getting very close to being done with the front end here. Oh, cancel that. Okay, now let's implement the actual pagination. And we could do that by just creating a slice that we're going to map over instead of the list of all jobs. Jobs on page, which is just jobs slice. Okay, let's think about how to do this. First number is going to be, okay, yeah. So active step, let's keep in mind, is our page that we're on now. So the lower bound is going to be active step times 50, and the upper bound is going to be active step times 50 plus 50. Now all we're going to map is jobs on page, not the full list. And now we only have 50, so much more navigable in terms of what's being rendered. And then if we go to the next page, it updates. Next page updates. Sweet. All right, that is our pagination done. Now all we need left is this pop-out modal. And then our front end will be, all we need left is the pop-out modal, and our front end will be totally done. So what I want to do is click on this, and then it'll give me a more detailed view as well as a link where I can apply. So the first thing I want to do is add a hover state to this job div with a hover pseudo class and CSS. And then I'll just make cursor pointer, and I could also make the colors a gray color, just so it's very clear that we are hovering over this page, or over the job that I'm indicating. So that doesn't look great, but it's okay for now. Let's just make this a little bit of a darker gray than dark gray. All 6s here. All right, so that looks fine. Okay, so there's our hover state. Now on click, we're gonna want to push that job into the modal state, because we want to know which job specifically to display in the modal. We also want to set a modal open flag to let the app know to show the modal itself. I think this is going to make a lot more sense when I actually write it out. So I'm going to add it to the, let me think about this. Yeah, I'm just going to add it to the bottom of jobs below my mobile stepper, and I'm going to pull another component from Material UI to do that. And you might have guessed that it's going to be a dialog component. So if you go under feedback, there's dialogues, and I kind of already know the one I want because there's a lot of them, and it's going to be the slide in alert. I just think this one looks pretty cool because you click it and then it, oh, wait, that didn't slide in. Where's the slide? Okay, so you can see there it kind of slid up and in. My computer is going slow, but it'll look cool. Okay, so we have to import a bunch of these components for this one to work. In a perfect world, you would make this modal its own component, and I think I will do that actually. Call it job modal.js. Let's bring it React, export default, function job modal, and our prop is going to be called job, returning JSX, and importing everything I just copied. Also, there's some forward ref business going on here, but we'll just trust that works like the material UI docs say it does. And let's bring all of this in to here. I am going to delete these though, or rather I'm going to move these into our parent component because that's where we want to manage the state from. It's going to go in the jobs component. Let's consolidate this down. This is for pagination, and then modal. Consolidate this down too. Okay, now we want to import job modal. Then put this at the top here actually. Job modal, open is open. Job is, okay. Now this is where we have to define our actual modal state. Active modal, active, no, selected job. Let's do selected job. So let's do just one more state. Use state. Starting out, it'll be an empty object, default state. And select job will occur when we click on a job. On click, set some more room there. Select job, like that. So there's a callback in the onClick function that will run when we click, and it's going to set the selected job to whatever job we click. Good start. And then that selected job is being passed into job modal. Let's just rename this to be extra clear. Destructure job and open. And if there's no job title, we know this hasn't been set yet, so we just return nothing. That's just protecting against a empty object. And let's see. Oh yeah, we also gotta pass in our oh, well no, we don't need this because this is happening one level up, right? And that also reminds me we have to not only select the job but set the modal to open as well. Handle click open. And then handle close is gonna happen here. Handle click, no, handle close. Okay. Pull that out and okay. Let's see what errors we're getting. I'm sure this isn't gonna work out of the gate, but just got a typo there. Okay, so if I click, what happens? Alright, shit. Okay, we actually have to pass down this function like that, and then we open job. And we do that on click here. Because it wasn't running. We needed to put it on the child. Oh, nice. Nice. Got it down. Alright. So title. Now we could start putting in our variables. This job title. Instead of just having that there, maybe we also put the logo of the company. So yeah, let's make this fancy. Let's do a image source company job company logo and detail logo. In here we will do detail logo. Make it pretty small, 30 pixels. Float right. Now back over here, we of course want the company, and in the content, we definitely want the description. Okay, one tricky thing though, you'll notice that the description is in HTML. It's an HTML string. So a trick with React is if you want to actually render HTML from a string, it's considered dangerous because you can put in script tags and execute script on someone else's browser. So if you want to allow this as the developer, you have to use the dangerously set inner HTML attribute like that. And then you pass in an object with the key HTML equals whatever you want your HTML string to be. And that'll do the trick, but it's, again, dangerous, so use it sparingly. As for the buttons at the bottom, let's change this one to apply, and this will just be a link to the original job posting for now. So we'll wrap this in an anchor tag, ahref, wrap it in an anchor tag of job.url, which is the link to the original job you see here. Closing, anchor tag goes on the other side of the button. Maybe we don't actually want this button to close the modal, and then I'm just going to save everything we just did. Now I'm opening it again. We do have an error, but it's looking pretty good. And I'm wondering if the reason for this is that I just have to use the dangerously set inner HTML directly on this. Let's see if that works. Changing this to a self-closing tag. And one thing I want to do also is put a break between the title here and the company, because they were both on the same line. Actually, let's just do it like this. Put in a little hyphen to separate them. When I open, click. Okay, awesome. And if I click apply, it'll take me to the company, or rather the original job posting, which we may want to make a little more complicated down the road, but for now it's good. One more thing I want to do is make this link a target blank, so it'll open in a new tab. _blank. So that'll open this link in a new tab. All right, as far as the modal goes, I think we're pretty much good. So for now, I mean, that could be, obviously we could add a little more pizzazz to this front end if we, continue improving it over time. But for now, I mean, it's very functional. It does everything we want it to do. I can click on different jobs and get a different, listing. This opens and closes, and these are all working with the logo. And I can scroll. It looks pretty good. So I want to say our front end is done. All right, guys, we're so close to being done. We literally just have to deploy our app, and we'll be home free. A lot of people are afraid of deployment, but it's not that bad if you break it down into steps. When I think about what we need, it's going to be a domain pointing to a virtual private server, which is hosting Nginx. Now, Nginx is called a reverse proxy. It connects your server to the public internet and provides protection between those requests. The other thing we're going to need is a process manager on our server after we install our dependencies that we have in our local environment. So we're going to need the same things, Redis, we're going to need Node.js, and then we're just going to need to send over all our files so they can actually run on our server in the same way they're running locally. So let's do it. I've pulled up a bunch of docs here we're going to need. It's just going to be a lot of copy and pasting for server configurations, and I'll put all these links in the description. So like I mentioned first, we need a domain. I already bought one on Google Domains, but you can buy a domain a ton of different places. I just like Google because of the interface, and it's because where my other domains are. So I've opened my domain. I already bought it. Normal.com domain is going to be about $14 a year. And the first thing we need to do is use the DigitalOcean name servers so that domain can be directed over to our server. So you'll see that I have clicked on my domain. I've opened the DNS tab, and then there's a name servers tab, and I've clicked use custom name servers. Now I'm going to put that on pause and jump over to the DigitalOcean dashboard. You can make a DigitalOcean account for free, and it'll give you this dashboard where you can create projects which have resources inside of them. A project is basically just a folder for a bunch of resources, including domains and virtual servers, and then all this stuff you see down here. So I'm just going to create a new project and call it entry-level software jobs, ELSJ, and it's a web application. So I'm just going to create that. And then, like I said, it's just a folder. We're going to start with no resources. So I'm going to skip that step for now. But right away, we're going to create a domain. And the domain is going to be the one that we bought, entrylevelsoftwarejobs.com. So I'm just going to put that here and then add it. And you'll see that I have the DigitalOcean name servers here. So it's NS1, 2, and 3. So I'm just going to copy this by clicking it and enter it here. And we need all 3 of them. So I'm just going to expand this out, make this one 2, and then make this one 3. Now, when you change the name servers, it could take a little while to actually update. It says up to 24 hours. A lot of time for me, it's instant, but it's not always the case. So you might have to wait. And we'll see what happens here. So next thing I'm going to do is actually create a droplet, which is our VPS, virtual private server. You could do this on any cloud provider. Other common ones are AWS or Google Cloud, but on AWS, this is called an EC2, and then I'm not sure what it's called on Google Cloud, maybe just a VPS, but on DO, it's called a droplet, which is just a server. So what you have to do is choose your operating system. I'm choosing Ubuntu Linux 1804, and you could choose the size of your server. You could always upgrade it later, which requires a server restart. So I'm just going to pick the $15 a month, which has 3 gigabytes of RAM and 60 gigabyte of storage. And then moving down, you could choose your data center. Where is your server physically located? And then moving down, you could do private networking is useful if you have, multiple servers talking to each other. But the most important part is here, add your SSH keys. You're probably going to want to do a new SSH key, but I already have mine saved here. You definitely need this step because you need it to actually get into your server to connect to it. Otherwise, there's no way to get into it. So you definitely need a SSH key. And then feel free to look up a tutorial to set that up. I'm not going to do it here, but it's pretty easy to do. And then I'm just going to call a hostname master because we're only going to have one server with all our services. And then finally create this. So this server is now being created. It doesn't take too long. And I'm going to go back into my domain and add an A record for @ which is just the root domain. And I want it to direct to our master server. So I'm just going to create that record. And that is step 1 in linking our domain to our server. Now, once this finishes, which it looks like it just did, we got the green light here. I'm going to copy the IPv4 address. That's the IP address. And I'm just going to SSH directly into this server by doing root at IP address, just like that, SSH root at IP address. And it looks like it wasn't completely finished loading, so I'm just going to try it one more time. And now we type in yes, and there we go. So you can see our operating system here. And now we have a command line in our server. So we're actually in our server through a secure shell. That's SSH. So I'm just going to clear this out with Command K. And it's important to look at the command prompt to know where we actually are. We don't want to be installing things on our local machine that we think we're doing on our server. So always keep an eye on this. I'm root at master, master being the name of our server. All right. So as I mentioned, we have to install Nginx to actually talk to the public internet. And if we have a domain, we also want to install an SSL certificate, which gives us the HTTPS secure connection. And that sounds complicated, but it's really easy if you use a tool like certbot. I have the documentation open here. All you do is you choose your software on your system. And as you'll recall, we used 1804. And it'll give you a series of commands to just enter into your server, and it'll install pretty much everything you need. So I'm just going to run these commands, and a few of them require me to hit yes. So I'm just going to do them one at a time, make sure each one works, while periodically clearing out my console with Command K. Just to give us more space. So there's one where I have to hit yes. And let's just keep going through these. So the nice thing about this certbot is usually you have to install Nginx on its own, but this will install our Nginx and our certificate all at the same time. And then we just have to update our Nginx config, and we'll be already serving our application to the public internet through our domain. Okay, last command here. Yes. All right. Okay, I'm going to copy this sudo certbot nginx command, which is what actually runs the installation, and then I'm going to enter that in, and it'll take us through a series of prompts to actually install this. So I'm going to put an email and then agree, no. Now we need our actual domain. Got to make sure we spell it right here. Entrylevelsoftwarejobs.com. An important thing to take note of here is where it deployed our certificate. So it deployed our certificate in sites enabled /default, which is a config file that we later have to edit if we want to make any changes to our domain configuration. So we're going to open that later to update the config, but just keep in mind that location. Okay, congratulations, it was successful. So let's test that and see if our name servers have propagated yet by going to the domain, and that's exactly what we want to see. Welcome to Nginx. So this is a non-configured Nginx, but it is running, and we're connected to our server from the public internet, so that's great. So we're done with Serbot, and then, like I mentioned, we want to next edit our configuration file, which is at that location, etc nginx sites available default. And I'm going to open this with the Vim text editor by typing in vi and then the file location. Now, Vim is pretty cool if you haven't used it, but it's basically installed on all Unix operating systems, that is Linux and Mac OS, and it gives us a text editor right in the console. So what I'm doing here is I'm scrolling down to the second server block, which is actually indicated by this server bracket notation, and I'm going to look in here, and I can see my URL is defined here and being forwarded to basically port 80. So within this location block, I'm just going to completely delete what's in here, that is inside the location block, and then I'm going to put a new config in that is just pretty much something you have to copy and paste to do port forwarding to a local port on your machine. So I'm going to copy this location here, and I will put this link in the description where I'm getting this from, but this is just a standard configuration for port forwarding. So I'm just going to paste it right in. We have that, and then the other thing we need is to put this outside of our server block, which is actually the port that we're forwarding to port 80. Sorry, I messed that one up actually. Undo. Going to make a little space, and then I'm going to paste that in there. So we're forwarding localhost 5000 to port 80. That's what this upstream is doing. So I'm going to save this with escape wq, and that saves the file. And then I'm going to do sudo system control restart nginx, and that just restarts our nginx, no errors. Okay, so that's pretty good. Now let's keep moving and install our dependencies on our machine. So I'm going over to this other tutorial, how to set up Node.js on Ubuntu, link in description, and I have to install actually the Node.js version that we need, which is at least 6 to run create React app build. So I'm changing directory into the home directory, that's the squiggly line, then I'm curling this file. Now I'm just running the script that I received from this file, curl making a request to download some .sh file, which includes basically some setup configuration for installing Node.js, clearing the terminal, and then actually installing Node.js through apt-get, which is a Linux equivalent of Homebrew that's for installing just pretty much any software. Okay, that worked, and now I want to install this build essential file, which is, or rather module, which is a helps us run certain npm packages. So it just makes sure we have compatibility with every npm package that we want to use. Okay, next let's actually test out that our port forwarding is working by creating a test file called hello.js. So I'm going to do that with Vim here, hello.js, and then insert this code. And I just want to actually change that to 5000, which is what we set up our port forwarding to, as you might recall. And then I'm just going to save that with escape wq and then run it with Node. So Node hello.js, and it's running. So let's see if that is actually being forwarded correctly, and it is. So that's great. Okay, just scrolling down this page, and I'm going to stop that server. The next thing we need to do is install PM2, our process manager, which allows us to run all our services, our API front end and worker at the same time without us being actively on the server. So it'll run them, restart them, capture logs, and do a lot of stuff that's pretty cool for actually managing our server processes. So I'm just going to do, oh no, we don't have npm installed. So of course, you know, no tutorial is perfect, so let's just install npm as well. It normally does that when I install Node, but I guess I'm using a different set of commands this time to do this. So hopefully this just doesn't give us any problems later. And let's see if that works. Okay, sweet. So let's do the same command as before, npm install g pm2. Okay, and then to run our React app, we need to npm install g another dependency called serve. So we got those two done, and let's just test PM2 with our hello.js file. So let's do PM2 start hello.js, and we'll see our PM2 daemon is spawned. So now we can see our PM2 processes with PM2 PS, and there's a status, CPU, and memory, which is pretty cool that we get those stats in a dashboard. And then if I refresh my page, the app is still running in the background. So that's great. So if you remember the steps we outlined at the beginning, the next thing we need to do is actually get our files onto this server. And once we do that, we should be pretty much done. So I'm going to open up a second command window here. And this is, you'll see in the command prompt, my local machine. So what we want to do is send through the files that we made in local development. Before we do that, I'm going to open up this set of files and make one critical change that will allow us to access our API on our local server. And that is to basically change this to just a relative path. So I'm changing this to just /jobs, and actually I want to change it to be a little more clear to be /API/jobs. Now that means we also have to change our API route, which shouldn't be a problem, /API/jobs, and we have to make one change in our package JSON, and that's adding a proxy config, which allows this to still work on local development. This doesn't affect anything on production. So proxying all API routes to a target of localhost, sorry, need the double quotes there, HTTP localhost 3001 was our API server, I believe, and I'll save that. And again, that just helps us, still develop in the same way, but we need to make one config change for the production server as well. So that was our change in our files, and as I mentioned, I'm gonna go actually back into that nginx config file, etc nginx sites available default, and I have to add one additional location block just for the API route, because basically what this is doing is appending the relative path to the end of our URL, and nginx needs to know to direct this to actually port 3001 on when it's being run by the browser. So it's just basically a different port forwarding for a different path. And the way we do that is by getting a proxy pass to HTTP localhost 3001, semicolon's important. I forget that a lot. So escape WQ to save, and then system control, restart nginx. All right, so we're about to send through our files to our production server. I'm going to change into my client, and then I'm going to do an npm run build to create a production build of my React app that we just built. This includes everything from our package JSON and also our minified version of our JavaScript files and our bundle.js. Now we can see that we have a build folder, and we send this through the same way that we actually SSH in with a command called scp, and then I'm going to put in an R flag for recursive, so it'll send anything recursively within the build folder to our server URL. I'm just going to copy that again from here by going to master. Oops, that's not good. Okay, no, it hasn't been destroyed, false alarm. Copy the IPv4, and then do the same syntax, root at our IPv address, and then I need to put in a colon, and then the home directory. So where are we sending it to on our server? And we just want to make sure it's going to the home directory. Okay, so that's sent through all our files from the build folder. And now when I ls inside of our server, you'll see the build folder is there. So that's great. So let's start this up. We're not going to have any data running yet because we don't have our worker started on our server. But let's start this up by pm2 stop hello. This was our test server. We know it works. And then we'll do pm2 delete hello. And now I'm going to do a special kind of syntax to actually serve our build folder publicly. And that's going to combine the serve package we downloaded with the pm2 process manager. So I'm going to do pm2 start serve --s build. This is just saying use the serve package and run this command -s build under serve. It's the same as pm2 starting, just running this command serve s build. And in fact, let's try this first, serve s build, to see if our application is going to be served. So it says serving local and network to the port we're forwarding to, and there it is. Already, we can see it's kind of working. Here's our domain, and then here's our front end with no data. But like I just typed, we're gonna run this in PM2 with PM2 start serve as build. And you'll see it created under a name serve. That's probably not the best, but we can keep that in mind. This is running under the process serve, and it's online. And then when I refresh, it's still running. So that's cool. Now we have our front end running. So we have to send through our worker and our API files. So I'm going to clear that out. This is our local machine again. Change directory out to our home directory. And then we want to send through scpr, let's see, API. And I'm just going to hit up a few times to get this command back. I'll send through the API folder to our home directory. Then I'll send through the worker folder. Then I'll also send through package.json to get our dependencies, namely Express and the Redis client. So back over in our VPS, I'm going to need to install Redis. So I'm just going to do sudo apt-get install Redis. Yes. And we can test whether that installed by doing Redis CLI as we did on local, and it seems to work, so exit. And now that we have all our files here, let's just check that we do. Let's do npm install to get those dependencies. And now let's start our worker, or rather, let's start our API, pm2, start API, index.js. I'll do -- name API, and then we'll also start our worker, pm2 start worker, index.js, name worker. Okay, everything seems to be running, but how are we sure that our worker is working? Well, let's do pm2 logs worker, just to see if those logs that we set with the console logs that actually give us the indication worker is working are actually going to run. So you'll remember that we did a cron for every minute. So let's see if those logs are actually going to run after a minute. So we just got to wait and see if that happens. And then once that happens, our Redis will be loaded. So in theory, we should be able to refresh our page and then see all the jobs there. But right now, we just got to wait. The suspense is kind of killing me here. I feel like it's been longer than a minute. I don't know if it's going to work or not. But I actually have faith. Okay, there we go. Come on, worker. You can do it. Okay, it says success, okay. And so now our Redis should be full. If I refresh, there's all our jobs. Amazing. So we have a deployed application. Everything looks just as it did on local. If I click into these jobs, let's see, it works. There's our description, logo, and everything. And then if I click apply, it'll take us to that position. So that's pretty cool, guys. We just deployed our whole app, and it didn't even take that long. I feel like that was around 30 minutes or so. All right, guys, that's it. We basically built a whole production application in less than 100 minutes. And we got it deployed, and now it's running on the public internet at entrylevelsoftwarejobs.com. So go check it out. But I'm thinking next, there's a few critical things we have to do before we're ready for like a full production launch, so to speak. This was just our base framework that we're building more features off of. But at minimum, I think we need a few more data feeds, and we need to make our algorithm a lot more robust, prevent it from breaking on errors, as well as filtering down those jobs a lot more. Because if we get in 5 feeds, we're just gonna have a huge amount of jobs, and we really wanna make sure those are entry-level jobs. So I'm thinking that we parse through the description and look for like 3 to 5 years of experience and take those out. I think anything less than 3 years would qualify as an entry-level job. So again, we're gonna have to keep working on the algorithm. And then otherwise, we're gonna want to add a little bit of monitoring, logging, different things like that, but that can all come later. Our MVP is done, and our base of our application is done. So that's pretty cool. So anyway, hope you learned something. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will talk to you guys soon.